or maybe not every video lesson, but most, I say this every video lesson, or maybe not every video lesson, but most video lessons, but this one will be a game changer for you. We are on week 5 of the How to Be Ready for Anything Like Eichel program, and we're going to talk about the effortless chop and release. And this is not just an effortless chop and release, some of which are an introduction we covered last week in the anchor release, but this is really all about tying in downhill skating into your shooting so that you can effortlessly release from any of the mechanics that you're doing in the downhill skating system. And so this will change the game for you, because this is that final link between downhill skating and the slingshot that has been missing but has now been found. So I've got great news for you. Today we're going to be going over how to tie downhill skating and the ready stance into a shot, any kind of shot. If you've ever struggled with being ready for a shot on one foot or not the other, or just not being able to be super reactionary to things, this will solve all of that. And I like to be very self-deprecating in this series, but it's so true because it was a huge problem for me. It's a huge problem for me to be ready for different shots. Unless I could prepare for it 7 days in advance before that puck was coming for me, the exact shot, it wasn't going to go where I wanted it to go. And even then, it still didn't go where I wanted it to go. So imagine playing this really random sport called hockey, where you had all sorts of different pucks coming from different angles, and different you have different kind of areas you're trying to aim at, and then trying to be ready. It just didn't work out too well. So if you are feeling my pain, or if you felt my pain, this week's lesson is for you, and this will unlock a lot for you. So just a reminder here, we've talked about the hockey ready stance, how it's very different than any other sport. Then we talked about unlocking rotation, how the hockey ready stance ties into rotation. And then, then the next week we talked about striding and lunging, how you can tie the ready stance into a stride or a lunge to adjust positioning, and how you get that stuck in the mud feeling and get unstuck in the mud. Then we talked about the anchor release. Now I'm going to show you how this factors into multiple footworks, and how you want to use this ready stance to be literally ready for anything. And that's it. We want to actually turn your ready stance into a shot, and not into any shot, but into all the different shots. And here is the trick to being ready for all the different shots, and it's literally about getting ready. So I'm going to pause here because I know this sounds simple, and you're like, okay, let's get to the meat of this. No, this is the meat. This is it. So pause for a second, hear what I'm saying, which is that a lot of players never actually get into this ready stance, ever. And then they never shoot that well because they don't get into the ready stance, and then it doesn't enable the rotation, and they can't use any of the shots that we've talked about, or any of the shots that we're going to talk about today. So this is your wake-up call. If you're missing shots, or if you're not able to bang in rebounds or hit one-timers, it's because you're not getting ready before the shot. Now you might say, no, of course I'm getting ready. But I got to ask you, is it the hockey ready stance, or is it what you thought was, a ready stance? And for me, I know a lot of the times, and a lot of players I see, they think they're ready, but they're really ready to skate, they're ready to stride. They're not in the hockey ready stance. So this is your cue here, and we're going to see a lot of different examples here of the hockey ready stance, and how Eichel uses it before any shot. So, but before we get into that, we've got to get into some tennis examples. So why does this whole thing work? Why does this whole effortless chop and release work? Well, if you take a look here at Federer, you can see that in one situation he's actually going left to hit the ball, in the other situation he was going right to hit the ball. But he gets into the same stance every time. So you can actually see here that he has both feet planted like this both feet planted like this prior to his rotation. So you can see he plants his foot here and here, and the same on the other side. So we've got here, you'll see him step here, and then they both plant before he rotates. So if we look back at a Eichel shot, or let's take a look at an Eichel shot, you'll notice that the same thing happens. He plants in that ready stance prior to the shot. And let's take a look at another example. So we can see here, ready stance, you get into the ready stance, and then shot. Now it's a different shot, and we'll see it again here. See right here, ready stance, and then different shot. And then in a non-Eichel version, and we looked at this last week, ready stance, shot. So a lot of players never actually get into this ready stance. Now, I used to call this the corkscrew, that you have to corkscrew before you shoot. But the difference being now, like the evolution of this, is the ready stance, right? The internal hip rotation, the toes in, aggressive heel pressure, weight to the heels. So why this works is because just like you see here with Federer, he's always getting into a 2 foot down. He's getting into his own tennis ready stance prior to rotating. You can see that Eichel does the exact same thing here. You can see how he gets into that ready stance here. You can see how he's getting into this ready stance here, internally rotated, keeping that internal rotation, and then rotating. You can see it here. He's in a ready stance, but then he uses it to fake, gets back into a ready stance, and then shoots, and then ready stance into a whole different release, right? These are all 3 different releases in 3 different situations where he's in that ready stance pre the shot. And then here's McKinnon with a really similar approach. And he's turning that into the anchor shot, which is something that we went over last week. So that's actually why we did the anchor shot last week ahead of this one, because the anchor shot actually forces you into this. But now what we're doing is we're going to translate this to all the different shots. And the other reason that we did the anchor shot first is because it's so weird and so different that you're not going to try to use other mechanics when you're doing the anchor shot like this. You're just not going to try them because they don't work. So it forces you to get into this ready stance and shoot and shot. That's why we did that last week. And now we're getting into the effortless release from any ready stance this week. So what are you going to practice this week? Well, you're going to practice 2 things. Let's get at least 250 reps this week on just any sort of shot. Now, not any sort of shot without a ready stance, but ready stance, then shoot. So I want you to be very deliberate about getting into a ready stance, then shooting. Not just shoot, ready stance, then shooting. And now, because one-timers I know are harder on your stick and harder to come by, let's get 100 reps of ready stance, then one-timer. Again, we're being deliberate about getting into the ready stance first, then shooting. Now, throughout this, depending on how strong you are as a shooter, how confident you are, you might get tense. You might feel tense. Well, don't do that in this week. Don't be tense. Trust the ready stance. So it's okay to miss shots. That's what training is for, right? So don't think or worry about it. If you miss the shot, you miss the shot. That's totally fine. That's what practice is for. All we're practicing is going ready stance, then shoot. And don't lean on your stick. Let your body rotate. Think of yourself a little bit more like Federer, right? Thinking of just rotating. He's not leaning on his tennis racket, right? But his tennis racket is part of the rotation, right? And that's what you want to do as well here. There's no way that Eichel can lean on his stick for this shot here when he just chops it away, just like that. Just that little quick release like that. So don't lean on your stick. And then don't worry about the foot that you're shooting from. Just focus on the ready stance. And then let whatever foot comes naturally come naturally. So as you can see here, the top one, he's shooting off his right foot. In the bottom one, he's shooting more off his left foot. McKinnon here is shooting off of an anchor. Here, he's shooting off of kind of like both feet, right? You can see here, ready stance, kind of shooting off both feet. And then here's a one-timer going backwards, is shooting off the left foot, right? So all of these different footworks, if that's a term, are enabled by the ready stance. So your job this week is to practice the ready stance, then shot, not anything post-shot, none of the footworks. Another time we can work on that, and we will, don't you worry. But today, this week, the focus is on the ready stance, then shot. And I'm telling you, as soon as you start to program yourself to do the ready stance, then shoot, especially on one-timers, you're going to change your whole mindset and your whole game. Oh, and by the way, that's next week. We're going to start talking about the mindset and positioning that comes from these mechanics. Because what's going to happen is you're going to stop being one of these players that's like, go, 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 sprinting into open space without that readiness. Now you're going to be the type of player, the sniper, the killer. You're going to be ready for that puck when it comes to you, and you're going to be ready to drive that to the back of the net. And that is the last step in how to be ready for anything like Eichel. And that doesn't come, by the way, unless you master the first 5 weeks, especially the fundamentals in the first 3-4 weeks, even this one. So make sure that you get that dialed in. Do your reps. If you haven't yet, cram them into this week. Go back a step and master that before we get into the mindset and position. And if you do that, I promise you week 6 is going to flow naturally from everything that we learned this first 5 weeks. So we'll see you then in week 6. Until then, you've got at least 350 reps. Practice that ready stance and then release. And I promise you, it'll be a game changer. Have fun with it, and we'll see you soon.